Good evening. Hello. Sorry to interrupt your conversations. We are going to make a start slightly late. We have experienced some transport issues with one of our speakers. She is on the way, but she's going to be slightly late. That's Nara Akwa, who's the General Secretary of the Students' Union. She's been talking with MEPs in Brussels at the European Parliament all day, being a leader. So she's going to join us after she's stepped off the train and not missed too much of the discussion tonight. So my name is Marcus Carlson-Jones. I just want to welcome all of you here. Thank you for attending this London Network panel discussion. So welcome to everyone in the room and welcome to everyone who's watching on Facebook Live. Sorry to have kept you waiting as well for a few minutes. So I'll just get the housekeeping notices out of the way. There's no scheduled fire alarm test, so if you hear a fire alarm, the fire exit is above you here, clearly marked, through the council room, and there's 2 fire exits on either side and a muster point over the road. If there's any kind of other kind of scare, reason for evacuation will be notified by the venue staff. So the cloakroom is down this way, down the corridor, as are the toilets. So right, that's the boring bit for people watching online. So I'll move on to why do we do this event? Why do we have this series of events? Essentially, we do a lot of alumni engagement, a lot of events in London. We have an annual dinner every year where we tell you about how our year's gone and how the university's performing. We also do a series, if you're not been to it, it's called Your Manchester Insights. We do them in Manchester and London. Do look out for those. That's your opportunity to learn about the cutting-edge research we do in Manchester. These events are about showing you the value of the alumni network. London is our largest single city alumni population outside of Manchester. There's around 30,000 alumni just in London. So just to give you a flavour of that, a sense of the network you can connect with, we bring you together in this room and then we invite a small number of you to join the panel on a particular subject. So we want to engage you with high-level discussion, informed debate about things that aren't necessarily research-focused, things that affect you in your professional lives. But also we want to give just as much importance to the time afterwards when you're able to talk with each other, exchange business cards, and essentially realise the value of the network that you're a part of. So I'd just like to say a special welcome to any offer holders we've got with us tonight, anyone who's considering coming to Manchester. We hope this is a persuasive advert for the university and the sort of graduate experience you'll get after you leave Manchester. And also to our global graduates. Anyone who's not familiar with the Global Graduates Programme, it's an innovative programme we run in Manchester. And it's an opportunity for our students to travel in a small group of 4 to one of 6 international business destinations. London and Paris is one of them, Singapore is another, Hong Kong is another, San Francisco is another. So we've got a group of students visiting Twitter HQ today, for example. So they're sat at the back and they'll be introducing themselves to you later on. But it's this week that it's taking place. So they've come straight from Paris, is that right, today? So they've made it just in the nick of time, a little bit ahead of Nar coming from Brussels. And it's a really great program. Please do speak to those students and ask them about it. It's a program you can participate in as a host, and also it's something we're really proud of at Manchester. We think it gives a great opportunity to the students who participate. So I do have apologies to extend on behalf of our Chancellor, Lem Sisse. He's really sorry that he couldn't be with you tonight. We've got a very, very able chair in Catherine Leopold, who's sat behind me here. And she's going to be chairing. She's very experienced, so you're not going to notice any kind of hitches or glitches. So we do actually have a message from Lem, which, if you'll permit me, I'll just read here. Hello, everyone. You may know that I've begun rehearsing the play Road by Jim Cartwright at the Royal Court Theatre Tickets aren't on sale yet, but you can get them. That was me. My plan was to come from today's rehearsal to this event, but unfortunately, unexpectedly, that isn't going to be possible. I'm so sorry for this. I've been attending the London Network programme this year, and I know you're going to get a fascinating, enlightening discussion tonight. I also want to say that I've taken my role as Chancellor as a real opportunity to learn as much as I can from this unique experience and to immerse myself in the life of this great university. It's why I've taken an interest in the work we do with our alumni all over the world, especially in London. For me, to be a good leader is to have an open mind, to be teachable, and to ask questions. Sadly, sometimes it also means making difficult choices. I had to make one today in not joining you, but a lesson I've learned, a good leader needs a good team, and I'll leave you with a very capable chair in my absence. Thank you, Catherine. I intend to join you in the London Network programme in the 2017-18 programme, and I will leave you with this poem I wrote on becoming Chancellor of your university, which I hope will tell you what I think is at the core of being a good leader today. Inspire and be inspired.
Open the dawn in the open sky, the laboratory, open the book, open the challenge with open eyes. Open, out, look. Open all minds, open all dreams, research, question, open all doors, open all senses, open all defences. Ask, what were these closed for? In the possibilities of light, the nature of trust, the strength of unassailable us. How strong the night lies as light aerates the dark, and atomic dreams multiply from a graphene heart. We who have walked the world in the name of here and where we came from, stand in this great city and say, I belong here. I belong. I bring my past, I bring my future, I bring my rights and I bring my song. I stand atop the University of Manchester. We belong here. We belong.
I find myself once again in London, once again upstaged by Lem. I don't know whether any of you were at the reception that we had for Lem when he became Chancellor, but he did two speeches. He did the first one without the notes that he'd prepared, and then he did it again with the notes that he'd found on his iPad prepared, and then I had to stand up and do a welcome for him. So I'm quite used to this impact of Lem on various proceedings. But I think Inspire and Be Inspired is at the core of what we're going to be talking about tonight in terms of leadership. Now, as you've heard, Na is on her way and she will be coming in. So we've decided that rather than wait for her to go first, Simon is going to kick off with his introduction to the topic, and then Alison, and then hopefully Na as she arrives, and then we will start to take questions from the audience. So I can hand over to you.
Thanks. Delighted to be here, and I hope we have a great dialogue. First of all, it's great to know that Na is over in Brussels negotiating Brexit, because I think that gives us hope that there might be a better outcome. So I'm Simon Haywood, double alumni of Manchester Business School. I thought I'd just give you a bit of context and tell you a little bit about my background as a precursor to the discussion we're going to have about leadership. I did an English degree. My first degree was in English, and I thought after that I'd better get an MBA to get a job. Apologies to any English graduates here, but you know what I mean. So I went north from Oxford to Manchester to what was, and I believe still is, one of the top two business schools in the UK. to do my MBA. In the good old days, in the 80s, it was a 2-year MBA, as they should be still, but they're not. So I did my MBA at Manchester, and then I thought, well, I better get some experience. So I went to learn about management in various commercial and general management roles. And then I went into consultancy. And after a couple of years working for other people, I set up my own business with my wife, who, for her sins, is a Cranfield MBA, but will not hold that against her. So the two of us ran this company for a while, and we were focused on developing leadership and leadership skills across a wide variety of organisations. And we sold that business to Marsh McLennan of New York in the late noughties in 2008. And I worked there for a while, but I found that not really my cup of tea. So I set up again in 2010. But at the same time, reflecting, and one of the key things I think we'll come back to today is one of the aspects of leadership that I think has become more prevalent during my period from the early 90s to 2008 was really the period when digitisation just transformed the business landscape. And we still see organisations to this day, high street names, still struggling with that ongoing revolution. So I worked through that, trying to make sense of that. And when I set up again, I thought what we missed in our old company was a real depth of understanding and a clarity of focus. So I started a second degree at Manchester Business School, which is the DBA, which is a relatively new programme. It's a doctorate in business administration. It's for people who want to work and who don't want to go into academia. So the PhD is a wonderful programme, and it's a world-renowned programme at MBS. But the DBA is also world-renowned and is for practitioners. It's got the same academic rigour, but it allows you to carry on retaining some sort of contact with normality through work. So I did the DBA, and out of that DBA research, which was into the types of organisations I'd been working with and studying and sort of being part of for the last 20 years, it was studying the organisations that were transitioning to, coming to terms with the digital world in which we operate, the connected world in which we operate, where one customer experience can get tweeted and commented on to thousands around the world within seconds, where the world where there's going to be 50 billion internet-connected items in the world by 2020. There's a continuingly exponential increase in digitization. And what the clients we work with nowadays, they're still struggling to get on top of that, and it's fundamentally, in my view, a leadership issue. And all the research into how do we cope with that digital explosion and the changing customer expectations that drives, because you can do everything through your smartphone now, and most of us do. That's what I'm interested in, and that's what I've been researching. And available at Amazon, good bookstores, and anywhere else you like. There's a brilliant book on this called Connected Leadership, which is the output from my DBA, my doctoral research, and it's all about this level of connectivity and how leaders can embrace that connectivity and help nurture it, or fight against it, and in my experience, typically fail. So that's my thesis. That's my topic. That's what I'm here to talk about. I hope you find that of interest. I thought that having worked for 25 years in the industry and done a doctorate, I should at least produce something useful out of that experience, and hence the book, which I was delighted to launch at the business school back in 2016. So that's me.
Thank you. And just a note on that digital connectedness, we have got the Facebook Live audience, and we will be able to take questions from that audience as well. So we are embracing
excellent
the connectivity. Alison.
Well, good evening, everyone. I wanted to share a thought and a personal story, because I haven't written a book, and I didn't go to Oxford. So very much a personal story. The thought, great leaders have this magic quality of building teams of ordinary people and inspiring them to do extraordinary things. And I learned that in Manchester, a city we all know and love. And I learned that on the 15th of June, 1996. So that's almost 21 years ago. And I can see some nods in the audience. That was the day that a terrible bomb ripped through the heart of what was my adopted home city. I'd studied in Manchester for 4 years, 4 very happy years. I'd come to London where the streets weren't really paved with gold and had 10 years, but I'd found my way back to Manchester. And the terrorist bomb just basically ripped a hole in the middle of Manchester, and we all remember where we were the day that happened. And I remember taking the Metrolink through this devastated part of the city centre and feeling a real sense of many, many emotions, but the strongest one being, I want to do something about this, I want to do something to help. And I was working with KPMG at the time, and so I persuaded my boss that he wouldn't miss me for 3 months and persuaded him to loan me to Manchester City Council, or rather to the indomitable then old plane Howard Bernstein, to help sort of, if you like, try and right this terrible wrong that had happened to the city. Sorry, I still get quite emotional about it now. So we set up a task force. We Manchester Millennium Limited to spearhead the rebuilding. We rolled up our sleeves and created this master plan, which was a really sort of powerful vision of what not the most attractive part of Manchester that had been destroyed by the bomb could be. And we got on with the job of rebuilding, particularly Shambles Square, the aptly named Shambles Square, which you'll remember was a sort of concrete maze. And the aim was to really create a human city, so beautiful new buildings, squares, parks, and new streets. And it was all going fine. And then 12 months in, Howard said, right, Alison, or Love, as he used to always call us, I'm off back to be chief executive at the City Council, and you're now in charge, and gave me the key to his office. And I was only 30 at the time, and the responsibility of leading such an important project, I was a bit I was completely terrified, actually, that sort of fear of failure, because it was such an important thing that needed to be done. But Howard continued to be an incredible sort of sponsor and support for me. And in that respect, he was a truly inspiring, still is a truly inspiring leader. Howard had worked for the city forever, since he was 16, and we always had this theory that if you chopped him down through the middle, he'd have Made in Manchester sort of written all the way through him, like a sort of stick of rock. And Howard's magic quality was he took ordinary people like me and inspired them to do extraordinary things. And of course, the story of Manchester has a happy ending. From the rubble, a beautiful new city appeared. I always remember the day we opened Exchange Square, and there were people in the middle of Manchester taking photos of Manchester, not something I'd seen before. And for me, it was a really powerful story of how, and quite a topical one at the moment, how you can turn adversity onto its head and create something, an opportunity and something good out of adversity. And for me, I learned 3 really important things about leadership from Manchester. I learned, first of all, what purpose means, what it really means, getting out of bed every morning and rebuilding a city that you love and doing it with people that are that passionate about it with you. I learned that leadership is something that you do with people, not to people. And that people love to be led by people that believe in what they're doing. And maybe most importantly, I learned a lot about me. Up until that point, I'd never really saw myself as a leader. In my mind, a leader was somebody that had a big ego and stood at the front of the room and had never had a moment of sort of self-doubt in their life. And I realised that they're not the only leaders, and they're certainly not necessarily the best leaders. And now you'll see from the bio, I'm chief executive of an extraordinary organisation called the Crown Estate that does many wonderful things. And I take that legacy and the things that I learned from Manchester and from Howard, and I try to apply them in my business every day. and I lead the business absolutely first and foremost putting purpose and values at the centre of what we do. And I built a great team at the Crown Estate because success is a team game. And again, that's something I learned from Manchester and from Olympics. And at this point, I should declare that I've been working. I didn't know that Simon was going to be on the panel this evening, but we've been working with Simon and Cirrus on a connected leadership programme for our top people in our business to really embed that whole sort of sense of purpose that really came out of the root of Manchester, to really create a really sort of powerful organisation with purpose, and to turn them into the kind of leaders, future leaders that hopefully we're going to be talking about this evening, and to inspire them to lead their teams in a way that take a bunch of ordinary people like me and inspire them to do extraordinary things. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we are still NAR-less, so I think perhaps we'll start with some questions from the floor, and then when NAR arrives, we can invite her into the conversation. I think the first thing for me to say is how nice it is to hear a description of leadership which is anti-Trump model. Because I was thinking about it on the way here this evening, and thinking about all the different models of leadership that we see in public life at the moment and how wildly divergent they are. I mean, politically, we've got the first job share of a political party in the Green Party, which I think would be completely unthinkable 10 years ago. And then on the other side, we've got Trump doing, well, whatever Trump is doing. And anyone that's been to one of these before knows that I'm not a Trump fan. I cannot pretend not to be partisan about that. But I also think a lot of the challenges that are facing us as a country at the moment are throwing these ideas into sharp relief. So I think we're comfortable taking questions on a wide range of questions about leadership. So is there anybody that would like to start with something to... Oh, here we go. Yes. And we have roving mics wandering around so that our webcast audience can hear us.
Question for Alison. Can you enlighten us as to why perfectly good buildings in Albert Square, in a perfect Victorian square, were knocked down and nondescript stuff was put in its place?
Oh, wow. Albert Square wasn't part of the brief for the rebuilding of the city centre, so I honestly couldn't answer that sort of coherently now. I mean, the city, I think, have had quite a strong commitment to sort of regeneration and renewal over, many decades, and, I love Albert Square and what they've done with the new library in St Peter's Square as a sort of real sense of, the real heart of the city. But I couldn't answer what you're talking about specifically. I'm afraid after we'd rebuilt Manchester, I was asked to go and do the same in Sheffield, but without a bomb. So I haven't actually worked in the city for quite some time. But I'd be disappointed if that is what had happened.
Over here next, please.
Thanks. Do you feel that the recent political upheaval, you brought up Trump, I think Trump's a good example, May and Corbyn recently, do you think people are desperate for authentic leaders? And to touch on the kind of connectedness, Trump is using Twitter. Potentially that was his one, good strategy of making people realise that he was actually saying things that people could believe. They might disagree with it, but they actually believed what he said. So it's more that feeling of authentic leadership and how people are getting it right and how people are getting it wrong, potentially.
Well, we could be here for 2 hours on that question. That's a great question. So going back to what Lem said about, he used the word open so many times, didn't he? And that sense of connectedness and openness to learning, openness to each other. I genuinely believe that the old way of command and control, the senior leader figure being the hero and having power, and everybody else being dependent is fundamentally obsolete. And the more connected the society becomes, the more driven by technology, the way we live and work and operate as human beings in our society becomes, the more and more obsolete that becomes. Because a command and control model, Trump is the archetypal, massive ego, heroic leader. He's got an ego, I'm compete with the next room.
That's not the party that you weren't invited to.
It sounds like some sort of
that's
stag
not the
do or a
room
girl.
that We're not quite sure why they're having such a wild time.
But it feels like that Trump and the protestation movement that he represents did tap into a certain disquiet in society. And UKIP had tapped into a disquiet in society which we can't ignore. So we've got to separate, in a way, the politics from the person. As a person, I find, I think we expect a level of authenticity, a level of... one of my sources was authentic leadership theory. So authentic leadership theory basically says it's not just about being who you are, because I get challenged all the time by people saying, well, Trump's authentic, he just says it as it is. Every morning he tweets away whatever he wants to say. That's authentic. And I'm thinking, I don't really think so. And there's a large body of academic research into authentic leadership that would also say, I don't think so. What he's doing is just being him. But what he is not something that personally I respect. And he is not showing a level of respect for others that is intrinsic to leadership in a connected world. So going back to your question around authenticity, authenticity is at the heart of the ability to connect to others and to create connections with others in our society, between different communities, between us as human beings, between companies, between people in companies, between companies and customers. The level of communication and transparency that we now have through the digital world is awe-inspiring. Freshfields, the law firm, did a study a couple of years ago into disaster recovery, and the average large corporate takes, I think, it's 18 hours to respond to a major crisis. Well, it's out on Twitter within seconds. So all the customers of Qantas who have got an engine blown up, they know about it within seconds or minutes. And Qantas, it's taking them 18 hours to respond. BA, similarly, a few weeks ago, a major crisis. The media and the connectivity that we all share now means that we all knew about all of that, perhaps ahead of some of the people in BA. So I think what it boils down to is the heroic leader who thinks that they can command and control an organisation or part of an organisation and be able to steer it correctly is no longer capable of being competitive. Therefore, we have to replace that with what's called a post-heroic leader, who is somebody who's got humility and confidence, who's got the ability to enable others to flourish and creates leadership across the whole organisation. Can I go on for a little bit longer?
Yes.
Because this is not new. This is, in the corporate world, this is new. This is last 20 years thinking and the last 10 years thinking. In the military world, I used to think the military was all about command and control. But the more I studied it, the more I realised that back in the 19th century, they cracked this sense of distributed power, sharing influence, respect for people, and requiring people to show initiative and be authentic and to respond. So that famous quote of "no plan survives contact with the enemy" actually comes from the Prussians and von Clausewitz in the early 19th century, because they were crushed by the French rabble after the revolution. The top army in Europe was destroyed twice. So they rebuilt themselves. It took 30 years, and they did three things. First of all, they established a code of ethics, what today we'd call values, that says we need to have respect for each other and work together. It's not about you're better than me, you tell me what to do. It's about we need to work together to be able to respond. The second thing they did was they set up what's called mission command, which is a structured devolution of power so that the people in the front line know what the parameters are and are free to operate and engage with the enemy in a way that's appropriate, which is devolved decision-making, if you read chapter 17. And the third thing...
There will be a test at the end.
So I won't rant all evening. And then the third thing was they set up a leadership academy. And if anybody here is in a large corporation wanting to set up a leadership academy, I'll speak to you afterwards. But they said, we can't take this old-school approach to the Trump command and control, I'm the all-powerful, I can do whatever I like approach. We need to train thousands, 100,000 leaders who show initiative, who've got the ability to challenge the rules, think for themselves, and act in a way that is consistent with the corporate agenda, i.e. we're trying to take that mountain over there, but will respond in a way that's appropriate. And they trained highly challenging, highly initiative-driven individuals, but with a collective sense of we're doing this together, therefore we're connected. Long answer, I apologise, but you hit a blue touch paper.
Well, I think no, go ahead. If I can add a little bit,
Sorry, please, yeah.
I think for me, authentic isn't just being yourself, because that is a trump. I think it's being purposeful in what you're doing, and also building trust. Trust and respect is a very important part of that, as opposed to just sort of being a megaphone leader. And a great example of that for me, I worked for 8 years on the Olympics, was somebody like Lord Coe, who led us through the bid and led us through the Olympics, and sort of the way he brought city and volunteers and athletes and that sort of whole sense of purpose together. So I think I think you can play a lot of different tunes on that sort of authenticity. Hi. But to be authentic and to be a really great leader, I think other things need to sit around that authenticity. And I think self-awareness is another element of just understanding the impact you can have on people.
Which I think is a lovely moment to introduce you to Na.
Hi everyone, sorry.
Who is out being her authentic self in many different spheres at the moment. So Na, would you like to give us your thought piece, and then we'll come back to the discussion.
Okay, great. Hi everyone, I'm so sorry that I'm late. Travel issues. I've just been in Brussels, which has been fantastic at EU Parliament. Obviously, the negotiations have just started. I'm not saying I was in the negotiating team.
That was our great hope.
No, hopefully I was now doing no. But I've been meeting with MEPs around sort of Brexit for EU students, internationals, etc. And my train was late, so really sorry for being late. So some of the things that I wanted to sort of discuss was about sort of leadership from my generation, so just about to come in, and how at the moment for how I grew up and sort of saw leaders, they were always sort of older, male, white, and no one ever sort of looked like me, sounded like me, or anyone of my friends, etc. And I think for the next century of leadership, that really has to change. And I think there are so many people out there with so much talent, but it's about opportunity. And it's that opportunity to have sort of leadership abilities or leadership opportunities from the very beginning. So I'm the General Secretary of Students' Union. I've been doing it for 2 years, so it's my last 2 weeks. And when I ran for that role, I mean, it was a big thing. It was a really big opportunity, and it's the biggest leadership role I've ever held yet. But thinking back, I did have opportunities to sort of step up and lead a little bit before I got to this place. So even in school, I was sort of like head of my house, and then I joined societies, and then I became on the committee. And I think for so many people, I was really lucky I got those opportunities. I sort of got to test out my style, test out how I wanted to engage with people before I got to an opportunity where, I mean, there was a lot more riding on it, and there's staff and money and all that kind of stuff. And so I think the opportunity for young people to get involved is really important. And I think the style of leadership that young people would want to sort of lean forward more is being one of sort of trustworthy and honest. And I think I heard you mention those words. And I think that's really important because, for example, for myself, I know that I can never ask someone or anyone on my team to do something that I wouldn't do myself. It doesn't feel comfortable for me. It doesn't feel right. If I'm not going to do it, why on earth would I ask them to do it? And I think there's a lot of leaders at the moment. I'm not going to comment or name names. Recent elections.
We've already had a go.
Okay, right, that's right. Who don't listen to other people, and who and there's a lack of trust for many leaders, because one minute they say one thing, and then they turn around and say another, and then they go and say this. And actually, I don't think it's an issue about people changing their minds. Human beings change their minds all the time. I think it's an issue of why did they change their mind and in the way in which they do it. it doesn't seem genuine. It doesn't seem they changed their mind based on evidence. They changed their mind because it didn't really work for the people that they wanted to vote for them or give them money or etc. And I think that's something that has been quite evident and is something that hopefully I think is going to change. And then the last bit I want to talk about, which I think is, I guess why I'm here, is the sort of aspect of leadership when you're elected. And I think elections are incredible things. Having elected representatives are absolutely incredible. But the thing that we have to scrutinise and watch out for is the aspect of what sort of elected representatives do you want. Because I think sometimes there are some people, sometimes it's a bit of luck. You elect someone and they're really competent and great, and sometimes that doesn't really happen either. But also it's about how you hold them to account and accountability in that. And I can give sort of my own personal examples of, I love all of our students, well, I love vast majority of the students, like a few are kind of mean to me, sometimes people will call you at 2, 3 in the morning and just expect you to be up because in their mind, you're their elected representative and so therefore your life is lived for them. And that sometimes plays out more on social media, Facebook, etc. So you can see sort of even wider burden now of sort of a fishbowl lifestyle for more people. And I think that's something to really watch out for as sort of we become more sort of on social media and technology. There is that aspect of how far do we push people's lives in terms of the leadership roles that they take on. So yeah, I think because I'm a little bit late, we can get started with questions, but that was sort of my take on where I think 21st century leadership is going. Thank you.
Yes, so if we come down here first.
Hi, good afternoon. I just want to fess up first that this is a slightly provocative question.
That's all right. As long as Trump hasn't tweeted it, we'll allow provocation.
Okay. So I did my DBA and my research was on global leadership and its relationship to diversity and inclusion. And what I found, I mean, I start from the premise that leaders are the architects of the organization, and therefore whatever they do shapes the culture, etc. However, we're looking always at the internal aspects of a leader's character as opposed to the external influences that they have to deal with. And so from that point of view, I think leadership and leadership development is outdated. What do you think about in terms of things around global challenges that we face, new ideologies, emerging challenges, etc.? How do you think, on a global scale, leadership and leadership programs are developing?
Well, I think Simon has to start that one.
Yeah, I'll give you thinking time.
Thank you.
No, interesting question. And I would agree to a certain extent. I think as we move into the more the digital arena that is constantly changing requires a mental alacrity and an ability to relate to the stakeholders inside and outside organisations and to manage much more diffuse networked organisations globally or nationally than was the case 10 or 20 years ago. So the ability to hold that fluid state and the architecture of a fluid state, the network that an organisation is evolving into, as many are, it requires a mental ability and a mental agility that is different. So a lot of, but I think leadership development as a response to that is moving more to being much more disruptive of the leader's identity, or helping the leaders we did a lot of work with helping leaders reshape their conception of themselves as leaders, which then can help them to reframe their thinking about how they lead others and how they lead the organisation. Because if I've got a mental model of what a leader is that's driven by my experiences in the 80s, 90s and even noughties, it's probably getting out of date. So giving people the opportunity to explore that and reframe for themselves how they think, how they want to behave, how they want to react to people emotionally is a really important part of that ability to create a fresh identity as a leader, as an individual. And if you can do that on a collective basis in an organisation, then you've got something really powerful, because then you've got a coalition of leaders who are A, on a journey together, B, open to the fact that they need to continue to reframe how they lead, and see developing a mental model that is shared about a more fluid, a more connected, a more agile approach to leadership. I think that's powerful. Well, it is powerful. We know that from the transformation it can then trigger in the way organisations cope with and embrace the digital world, the hyper-competitive world in which we're operating. But it's not straightforward.
That question of identity, though, doesn't that partly come back to then this idea of the fishbowl? Because when you were 30 and handed the keys, finding out how old you were and finding out what you'd done previously and finding out what your authentic, if you like, promotion was much harder than at the point when NAR hits 30. That will be out there and shared. So then that space to kind of step back and think, well, hang on, I've ended up in this position. What do I do and how do I do it? Is that changing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my early experience was delivering big, complex city centre projects, and you sort of had a beginning, a middle and an end, and they were reasonably contained, and the sort of global world didn't really come into it very much. Now I run a business, Crown Estate's a sort of £12 billion business, so a sort of FTSE top 50 equivalent. And it feels like a very complex environment. I mean, we report into Treasury, we're in a political arena, although we are an independently run and managed business. And running that scale of business in this, I call it VUCA world, volatile and uncertain and very complex. And very ambiguous. Trying to chart a way through that is more complex. And I've never been through, an MBA and a sort of formal education. I think formal education only gets you so far. I mean, I studied town planning and then did surveying, and so I've got a technical skill set. But if you like, a lot of my leadership skills have been learned on the job, and I'm still very much learning on the job. And the work we've been doing with Simon is trying to bridge that gap for a lot of people in the business. We've got lots of managers and we've got lots of technical experts. But given the world that Simon's described, that we're all now having to operate and run our businesses in, much more open, everything's happening in a much more complex and accelerated way. We're trying to equip people and equip the leaders of the future in our business. With the kind of skill set that Simon's talked about. We haven't cracked it yet, we've still got a long way to go, but I think it's a really interesting question you've asked. As I say, I don't know whether Simon might have more of a view, or you might have a view about how universities and business schools deal with that problem. I know that I personally found TED Talks and things like that. I mean, there's the Harvard Business Review. I mean, there's almost too much information out there, but actually you can access a lot of information, a lot of other leaders' stories. I think you can access a lot of bad examples out there as to how not to do it. And you're reminded yesterday with, the Barclays leaders up in Core, and some of the bad examples that this sort of very fast global, very short-term, very corporate greed-driven world that some of us live in, where it takes you, as opposed to the kind of leadership and purpose-driven organisations. And I'm lucky the Crown Estate is a purpose-driven organisation. We're commercial, and Treasury are hard taskmasters because all our profits go back to Treasury. But we've been in business for 950 years, so we can, and we're allowed to take a long-term view as to how we do our business. But I think it's a very interesting question. Thank you.
It is. I mean, there's a lot being talked about with your cohort and generation, sweeping generalisation, about agile mindsets, the ability to learn, unlearn, relearn, and then apply. I mean, do you feel that that's kind of how you're developing?
Definitely. My sort of past 2 years in the role have been about a lot around the global things happening, and constantly have to change the way we want to do something, how we think about something, and actually every single sort of global issue, not just global, but national, whatever's happening, really does impact my work. And so if I sort of sat down and said, for the next month, I'm going to do this every single day, that's never going to happen. It changes weekly, changes daily. I think a lot of people feel that now. We're constantly on the go, constantly have different information. We know hours after something's happened, minutes. And I think that does change your mindset. And so I do think very much about 10 hours ahead, because I don't think there's any point sometimes necessarily always thinking about things about a year ahead. Because, for example, a year ago, I didn't know we were going to, well, when was the date? Oh, a year ago I did. No, I didn't. A year ago I didn't know we were going to leave the EU. And here I am going to European Parliament. That wasn't a thing that happened a year ago. A year ago, so a bill was about to come out. All these different things. So they constantly change. And so I think you do have to keep up to it. I do think, having a plan, strategic plans, etc., are a good sign of leadership, and being able to write those and know in 5-10 years is what you want to aim for. But I think there is a reality check of knowing that if certain things happen, that's never going to be exactly what you set out to plan, and it's not necessarily a bad thing or a lack of leadership that you had to change direction.
I think I was just going to say, I think that's particularly interesting from an elected representative who are elected on the basis of presenting the plan. And I think that often happens a lot when leaders step into organisations. They're kind of asked, right, in your first 100 days...
Well, building in the resilience... I was exhausted just listening to Naz speak, actually, the sort of resilience of business leaders to actually deal with all that complexity and the speed of things happening day in, day out, you sort of year in, year out. I'm sure you see lots of executive burnout, and how you get back to that sort of balance of, dealing with things that are so ambiguous and fast changing.
Well, the phrase, we're all waiting for our Uber moment. I mean, a lot of the organisations and industries that we all consume and or work with, they're either experiencing or waiting for their Uber moment. When is the rug going to be pulled from underneath the industry that you work in, or the organisation you work in? What we're noticing is that actually the Uber moments are happening, and sometimes the incumbent suppliers, I can think of one particular very large, internationally renowned client who have got record profits, and they're doing very well, but the Uber moment has happened in their sector. But their momentum will carry them on for several years. And so all that planning and that thinking and that resilience is great, but they haven't recognised that the rules have changed fundamentally in the industry, and others have, and they will rapidly accelerate to eat their breakfast. So there's a lag effect, I think, of the Uber moments and the impact that it can have on very powerful incumbent suppliers, which is a leadership issue again. It's how do you recognise what's happening in your sector, even if it's fundamentally uncomfortable, that it's undermining your position, and yet you can make record profits because currently you're doing really well. And I think that's a real challenge. That's a paradox that leaders need to have the ability to recognise and respond to, and continue to lead the business in an effective way that takes a sort of an intelligent, a resilient mindset to accommodate those different levels of thinking at the same time.
But do you not think the shine is coming off some of those big disrupting, the Ubers of this world? I mean, there's a lot of talk at the moment, with the sort of toxic culture in those organisations, that sort of winner eats all sort of, kill the opposition.
Uber, British Cycling, that again, isn't that... I'm not sure that's related to the nature of technology. That's related to the human beings involved.
Culture, toxic culture,
absolutely.
I think.
Yeah. Okay.
You can win for so long, but it doesn't last forever.
No.
But you can, I suppose, earn a lot of money and leave a path of destruction in your wake.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Let's take our next question here. There's always a pause. Those of you watching online, there's a pause as we move the microphone around this evening.
So in my organisation, the two major things is thought leadership and challenging leadership. So when I think of what I'm most worried about, say, about May's leadership, it's not really what the media narrative is about, whether she's empathetic or feeling, and that narrative. My more concern is about this lack of ability of her ministers to challenge the central thought that is coming from the team. So what are your thoughts about thought leadership and challenging leadership?
Give
Yeah. I think challenge is absolutely important. If I wasn't getting challenged by students, by the rest of the team to say, why are you doing this? How did you come about this? The reasons, and giving validity so that they are brought on board as well, then there's no point. Because then I'm leading in a bubble and I'm not actually representing my members. And I think that aspect of leadership should be carried through in any organisation, whether it's for profit or not, because if you're meant to be working in a team, you're not really a leader, in my eyes, if you don't have the others along with you. And if they are not able to have their challenge, they're not really then bought into what's going on. And so I think I agree with you. I think that is an issue of leadership, because if one or two people are making all decisions, people aren't part of that team. And so can you really call yourself a leader? You're a lone wolf sort of doing your own thing, and you may have the position and the title, but positional power only gets you to a certain point. And I think to make real change, you need to have a team around you to build that. And I see that model working a lot more. You can see sort of cooperatives and those sort of models of shared members getting together, make decisions are really growing. And I see that as the sort of it's already an emerging business, but even more so coming forward, and social enterprise and people who the products are for building into it. And I think that's a really exciting thing to start coming forward more. And I think should be applied to older sectors as well, because there is some merit in it.
I think one of the things we've been doing in the Crown Estate, it's sort of deep-rooted in history, but trying to transform it from a traditional sort of landed estate with quite a sort of fixed mindset and very hierarchical into what we call a sort of modern and progressive business. And what you talked about in terms of constructive criticism and giving people the confidence to have honest conversations, as opposed to that sort of command and control structure and sort of being very subversive to the next layer up and being very hierarchical. And we're trying to sort of cut through all of that, and we're making a reasonable amount of success. And I think it comes back to one of the things Simon was saying earlier about how you democratise the organisation and you push power into the organisation. And you actually change the mindset that leaders aren't just at the top of the business, right at the top, but actually that anyone in the business can become leaders, and you support them, and you're open to constructive criticism as well as new ideas. And I think if you can't construct a modern organisation like that, then you'll die. You'll be a dinosaur, because there's just one brain at the top, and one brain doesn't win business these days. That's the old model.
I would agree entirely. And but the only two things to add to what you've said, I think on the one hand you've got Trump, who fires the head of the FBI, who has the audacity to challenge him. And then you've got Alison, who's an exemplar of connected leadership, clearly, because she encourages...
Because I'm a client.
Surely not. No. Great. Let me change it to a different client. I was with a software house in Manchester on Monday, yesterday in fact, and they've been hugely successful, and they've grown really quickly, and it's all owned by the 83-year-old founder, and he's grappling with, and he still works in the business on a part-time basis, but his son-in-law runs it. Brilliant company. The client works across the UK, big clients. He has been an heroic leader for 35 years. He is struggling and really making massive progress to stop talking about I and to talk about we, and to start to encourage people to challenge him in a way that has never happened, and to have courageous conversations with people to say, I'm open to influence, I'm open to your view, I may be wrong. And he can see it. Hurts him to say it, but he knows it's the right thing if the company is going to continue to flourish as his legacy. So he is going through amazing mental gymnastics all the time as he works. He keeps reminding himself that he needs to reinvent himself if he's going to allow the company to reinvent itself. But he's doing amazingly. It's a joy to watch. But it's not easy. If that's your history is to have been. He made every decision for 35 years, but now he's saying, okay, to go to the next stage, I need to be open to the influence of others. to have that challenge that you talked about.
And others might have good ideas too.
Heaven forbid, absolutely. That's right. Yeah.
But I think that does have to be authentic, because I think we've all experienced leadership where someone says, so what we're going to do now, and you're thinking, well, here comes my to-do list.
That's right, yes,
And I think that's one of the challenges of that collaborative, cooperative model, is you can have this veneer of this is how we do things, but everybody knows in the room what, and people fall into those roles. So then that change has to not just be about the leaders, but it has to be about those being led as well, who don't just default back into, well, what do you want to do? That's it.
I've got a supplementary question to ask you first, Catherine. What happened to your wonderful squawk box, which a lot of people, catch box? Which
the catch box this evening, unfortunately, was the victim of technology. It will be back. For those who don't know what we're talking about, we generally use a catch box microphone, which keeps things flowing. Unfortunately, we were defeated by the technology this evening. We will have it back again. Please don't throw that microphone at anybody in excitement.
Okay. My proper question is, before people become leaders, you tend to have some kind of expertise, whether it's engineering, finance, IT, or something like that. And it is said that the higher up a company people get, the more time they spend doing things that they're not good at. And I think the people that I've seen, I think are really good leaders, know the things they're not good at and don't do them, but surround themselves in their teams with people who do. How does that fit in now with not doing anything you wouldn't ask anybody else to do?
I think it is...
Sorry, and would the other members of the panel agree?
So not being tasked with anything else I'd ask other people to do. I mean, it is tricky. I mean, I'm in a team of 8, and so there is an element of, there are some things that we're experts as students. That's what we came in to be. We were students. That's what we know. And there's some bits I'm not an expert in. It's a £7 million turnover organisation. I'm not a financial expert. So I hire a really good finance director who knows what she's doing. She's absolutely excellent, and trust in being able to take on some of the things you said. I think if no one is ever going to know absolutely everything, and the pleasure I've had has been able to work with really incredible people who really know certain different bits and can excel in it, and I think treating them as experts as well within it is really important. But then also, sometimes, in a way, so I'm on the board of governors, and I'm not a financial expert, but I sit on the finance committee, and so there are people on it who've worked in finance for years, and so, you know, after a few months, and it's been about 2 years, I've learned a few bits. I now know how it works. I can see the accounts and know when that number looks a little bit wrong or something, and I think also being able to sort of say it and challenge it, even though I know I'm not an expert, I'm not a chartered accountant, I can also use my sort of general common knowledge, common sense, and see something. I think that's something that we have to sort of challenge. What is expertise? Is it something that is just your degree specialisation, or something you picked up after years? Or can expertise grow and change in loads of different things? Because I might not say I'm an expert in finance, but I know I'm pretty good at reading our financial accounts, and they might be really different to another one, but you sort of pick things up. So yeah, no, surrounding myself with people and learning very, very, very fast.
I was once recruiting for an incredibly influential and inspirational leader of a business, and I put their kind of first tier in, and then they grew, and then next, and then they sold ultimately to Experience and went in to be part of a very big corporate house. But at one point, one of their big challenges was hiring a financial director, because it was being led by these 2 groundbreaking guys who were doing really innovative things. And they just kept, in their words, breaking financial directors, because finding somebody with that very traditional skill set who could support that kind of leadership and that kind of, I mean, it was agile before agile was a thing, was a real challenge. So, I mean, you said earlier that you're surrounded by a great team. How have you identified the people that you want in there, and how are you bringing them through such a big organisation?
I think the trick is to get over your own ego and hire people that are smarter than yourself, and not be scared to do that. and I've done that in the Crown Estate, and it was something I learned at the Olympics, really, where I was very much sort of command and control, because that's what I was taught leadership was all about, really, and then delivering such an extraordinary, large and complex project with an unrealistic deadline. You were going to completely fall over if you didn't actually, empower your team around you. So almost by being forced to share the burden and build, and everybody wanted to work on the Olympics, so you were allowed to pick, the great opportunity to sort of pick the best people that you wanted. And I was the first one into the Olympic Delivery Authority, so I could sort of create my own team. And I found actually one of the most rewarding things on the Olympics was actually seeing my team then go on to grow and develop and go on to bigger and better things. And it really taught me a lesson when I came into the Crown Estate about not just hiring the best team that you can and a mix of teams and mix of backgrounds and abilities, but then really trusting them and supporting them and making sure that they all work together as a team as well, and that they're not competing, but getting a really good mix of skills and sort of chemistry. And as I say, it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Howard was a past master at that, and he put an incredible sort of motley crew of people together, but he knew they all had the different skills and that they would work together well as a team. And if you can pull that off, you can achieve things that people never thought was possible.
And then that probably goes to your point as well about diversifying and getting rid of the cookie cutter. That's how we got hold of our CEO. We'll do that again. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Take another question over here. And then we'll come to you over there.
Evening, everyone. Firstly, an observation from earlier. Simon was talking about companies, big companies, not keeping up with what's happening around them, their Uber moments. I think that's great, because wouldn't it be so dull if these companies just carried on getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then we were ruled by one enormous corporation? So, and if we think back in our lives, sometimes those most difficult moments we've had when we've failed spectacularly, and you look back and think, actually, that's the moment when things start getting good. So that was just a thought on your point about, constant success would be so dull.
Tell Amazon that.
Well, one day it'll happen.
One day he will have his own.
Exactly. It will all happen. So my comment on leadership is that when I look around at different models and all of this, even on this sheet of paper, we've got a picture of the new and the old, and I kind of disagree with it all, because I think what makes a good leader really hasn't changed at all. It's something Alison said. It's having a very clear purpose and a vision that you can inspire people and take them to that new land that they can't see themselves, and then having integrity. And that's it. Those two things. Integrity is the opposite of, not opposite, but authenticity with integrity is what you're looking for. Authentic, it does what it says on the tin, isn't really what you want, because if they don't have integrity, they'll sell their own children to get what they want, which is usually a lot of money or power, especially in politics. So my thought around leadership is it really hasn't changed. Something to what you were talking about. And that led me to a thought of there must be a lot of leaders in the past that if they were modern leaders now, they'd be successful. They just need some modern skills, or, from what the other person was saying, to surround themselves with people that have the skills to deal with, say, Twitter, etc. So your thoughts on that would be interesting. Do you think if we were to take some of the really old, I'm talking 200-300 years back, and put them in the modern day world, that there'd still be great leaders? And then my last thought on that is, I think we're getting into a really dangerous state where everyone is being judged really quickly for their leadership qualities, and people are spending way too much time on learning to be a leader, all this stuff about reading books on leadership, etc., rather than the substance of getting on with what they're there to do, their purpose, their vision, and their integrity. And so you've got all these pop star leaders, and we're getting used to that. And so when we've got some really great old-time leaders, that doesn't mean old skills. They're being voted out. They're being displaced at the top of companies because they didn't handle their image right. I mean, that's dangerous.
So image versus competence. Who wants to talk about
Can I just? I think that's a really interesting commentary on leadership. So I'm off. No, I'm not. I think you're right that, and Alison's made the point about purpose and character, purpose and integrity, purpose and authenticity, and for me, those being clear about why we're here and what we're trying to achieve, and then how do we want to behave with each other? How do we want to show up? Where's that character and that authenticity? Absolutely fundamental, I agree. And probably some of the great leaders from the past were great leaders because they had that same sense of purpose and that same sense of character, which people respected what they were trying to achieve and why they were trying to get there, and also who they were as human beings. I agree with you totally. The only thing I'd add is that I don't think that in today's hyper-competitive world, that may not be sufficient, and I wouldn't leave it to chance, because the other three elements that I think are important here are about creating an organisation and creating teams that can adapt and respond really, really quickly. And so the ability to devolve decision-making to push decision-making closer to the customer interaction is really important. The ability to get team working and collaboration across the organisation, to cut up the silos is really important, and the ability to get the learning that allows us to adapt and see what's going on around us and adapt to that on a day-by-day basis is important. And you look at Inditex, who own Zara and other companies, they are described as the world's most disruptive retailers for a very good reason, because they've not only embodied that purpose and character, but they have institutionalized that devolved decision making, so stores decide what they want to stock, they've got collaborative achievement in their DNA, and they are agile. They're learning every day about what's selling around the world in different stores and adapting their entire supply chain to ship that. So they have embodied what I'd say is building on what you said, but also an organisation that can respond flexibly and in a way that is in tune with the speed of change around it, which most organisations haven't got. So I agree, and I'd add that there's more to it. But the fundamentals, I agree with you. Yeah.
I think you just need to look around this room at the pictures of leaders and the great engineers of history, and they're all white and they're all male. And so I do think there's an element to add to what you've said, which is around, breaking out that leadership and allowing a much broader range of people to actually step into those roles and different models of leadership as well. And at the end of the day, we shape the world that we're all living in, and I think it needs to be shaped for all of us and not just shaped by a very small minority of people. And if you look back in history, it was usually the sort of rich and affluent. I think giving us a much broader stretch of leadership is really, really important. And I think that some of the colour, gender, LGBTI, sort of creating the kind of work environment where all that talent can come to the top and reach those leadership positions is just so important if we're going to build the kind of future world that we all want to live in.
Anybody else here that would vote for Alison?
It's what Lem said about being open, isn't it? It's that being open to everyone and rather than closed, which is what's happening around the world so much nowadays, is that communities are closing, countries are closing down rather than opening up and creating connection.
And some of our leaders were not good leaders. I mean, I remember a chairman, not to be named, that I worked with, and I remember one of my first meetings I had with him, he said, he was American, and it wasn't Trump. Young lady, there's only two things that motivate people, fear and money. And a lot of people still think that. I didn't work for him for very long. But there are still a lot of old-fashioned ideas out there about what leadership looks like.
I promised this gentleman over here.
My question, I think, waited for the right time, and it's actually very simple. What is the right motivation for wanting to be a leader? And is it okay that everyone aspires to be a leader?
Mm-hmm. Oh, how perfectly timed.
That's a question.
I think maybe start with you.
I think, for me personally, what motivated me to want to be a leader was to create change. I had loved university. I'd loved sort of the experience that I'd had in my students' union, and I wanted to give other people the opportunity to have that experience and better. And so it was about making something that I'd experienced. So I think there's three reasons why people run for a union sort of president role or etc. One is some people like, a title and a bit of power. There's no two ways about that. That still happens. Two, there's people who absolutely hated their time and want to push forward some change because they thought it was terrible. And there's three, my camp, which is I absolutely loved it and just wanted to make it better for others and build on from that. And so I think really it was that sort of opportunity to have to create some change and leave and be like, oh, I actually did something. Even if I then disappear out of the world and you never see me again, at least I sort of did something in my sort of time that made a difference or made a change. I think that's a way in which a lot of people come into leadership. Others might come in for money, etc. But especially if you're going to work in the third sector, it's not really about the money because they don't really pay like super amounts. So I think, wanting to make a change.
I think I never thought of myself as a leader, and I sort of had a sort of thrust upon me a little bit at the beginning, really, sort of, Howard throwing me in the deep end of the swimming pool, really. But once you find you swim, and actually, you can make change and you can do things in a better way and influence things, it's quite an addictive thing, actually. I suppose that's why I'm now continue to be in that leadership role. And I think that with that comes a responsibility to keep, changing the world around you. Really, about, trying to avoid the things that you hate in the system that we work in and trying to push to, it sounds very trite, to make the world a better place, really, but, we try not to just build buildings and run away, the whole transformation of Regent Street, and, I'm a real sort of addict to sort of cities and good architecture and history, and being able to do some of the things that we've done here in the sort of the core of the West End. I just sort of love doing that, and being able to do that in a leadership role in a way that gives you actually a real job satisfaction and real passion about what you do. So I suppose I'm addicted to it now, really.
And I think the other part of that question was about, everybody, if we're trying to encourage everybody to believe that leadership is attainable, is that realistic? Is that the way that organisations should be growing?
Well, remember the Prussian army? They wanted to turn, I think it was 1,000 leaders into 100,000 leaders, and I think that's, so I think I would agree it's about making things better. The difference between the leaders I respect that I meet all the time and the people I don't respect is that, because I think all the leaders I think ambition is something that drives people who want to be successful. It's what do they channel that energy, that ambition into, and I think some leaders channel it into making things better in whatever field or whatever that means for them in their skill. And others, it's just about their own self-aggrandizement. But I think the way it's about you channeling a personal ambition with a desire to do something, to make something better, that's a pretty good combination. That other people then respond to and warm to and want to be part of. And join in.
Yeah, and leaders not necessarily leading a big business.
No,
it could be leading your local scout group, what Naz is doing in terms of leading things in the university. It could be leading your neighbourhood. It can be your sort of sporting team. It can be, in a number of different roles. And I think the key thing for me is doing something that you believe in, that you're really passionate about. And as I say, that might be sport, it might be gardening, it might be some kind of a membership organisation. It could be all these different things. It doesn't all have to be, chief exec of a business or a leader in a business. There's more to life than business.
Can I just add something? I've got three sons, and they're all sort of busy leaving home, and watching them grow up. What I've learned is that they all take responsibility in different ways, but every time they take responsibilities for something, they start to exercise leadership. They start to have an influence on others, me and others, to make something different. And stepping up and taking responsibility seems to be a sort of a seed. If you can find people who have a seed to take responsibility for something, then that can be give them expression for that, and they will fly, because they will just want to take more responsibility and make things even better. And I think that's a key ingredient in it as well.
I think as well, I was just going to mention, I don't know whether anyone else has read it, but Chris Hadfield, who was the Canadian International Space Station commander, the guy with the guitar, wrote a lovely book called An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, which is about his route to becoming an astronaut. And in there, he talks about always being a zero. Because I didn't know this about astronauts, but you kind of think of it as kind of being this funnel towards your ultimate achievement, which is going into space. But lots of people train to be astronauts and never get to go into space. So if going into space is your ultimate moment of leadership, but you never quite get there, if you're too fixed on that funnel, psychologically, that means you're completely incompatible with becoming an astronaut. And then when you come back down from space, you have to go back to the back of the queue and be the zero again. And then you have to hand over these things that you trained to somebody else to do, but bring your experience into it. And that's then really, that kind of in the context of leadership, kind of this literally moment in the stars, and then you're the guy that has to put the other guy into the seat.
Return to the shop floor.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some really interesting things in there about then how you build an organisation of people who are all striving for their ultimate objective, but are very comfortable in the role that they're doing towards that objective, which gets that team. You know, it was one of those books that I ran around. I read it over a period of about 2 weeks. I spent 2 weeks just talking about life on the International Space Station to anybody who listened. So if it had that impact on me, maybe it was on somebody else. I think we have time for one more question, and I can see 3 hands up. I think we're going to go over here because we haven't heard from the room for a bit.
Hi everyone. So my question's in regards to leadership of the youth. So I do a lot of work with like social mobility programs, and what I find quite difficult is when I'm working with young children who are from like the age of like 11 to 15, is inspiring them when they're from like generation of like unemployment, or like Noah mentioned, they don't see like figures like themselves in leadership roles. So like working like as doctors or lawyers, etc. So I suppose it's different in the context of when you're working in the private sector. People are there because they want to, so they've got that ambition. I suppose, Alison, you mentioned that you had a sponsor in terms of Howard when you were working at the council at Manchester. So how do you kind of like teach like young children and people to kind of take away them artificial barriers that they build up for themselves and make them see that the potential that they've got when they can't see it themselves? I suppose when you were given those keys, that was like an opportunity for you, but often just putting students in that opportunity is quite difficult themselves because they need to put themselves forward and realise they have the skills to do that. I suppose just practical advice, how would you approach that?
Yeah, and also I should say at this point that we have in the room our global graduates, who are people who are having that unlocked in them at the moment. So if anyone wants to talk to some guinea pigs for that kind of work, I thoroughly recommend a conversation with the global graduates later on. But no, perhaps...
I think as someone who sort of, I came through, etc., and I did have role models, which is really nice. My mum, my dad were role models to me, just because of where they sort of come to in their life. But I think linking the ability to step up to something with a passion. So a lot of people think leadership is you're a politician or you run a business. And actually, I got involved through leadership, through music. I really liked singing, so I started doing my singing group. And then I was in the choir. And then they're like, oh, do you want to do a solo? And then and I think being able to have leadership through your passion and something that you really enjoy. So then I went on to create my own little choir with younger school kids, so that hopefully, and it's sort of carried on. And I think we sort of push upon opportunities upon people, and the reason why they don't step up to them is, one, they think that they shouldn't be there, and 2, it's not for them. Whereas if you make the opportunity for them, it's something that they actually like and they want to do it, and it's organic, you'll see people absolutely fly through. There's some great organisations. There's an organisation in Manchester called Reclaim that work on sort of young working class people entering leadership. And they're some of the most amazing people I've ever met, because they know that they're good, they know that they could be leaders, and they've found an organisation that are just giving them that space and telling them that you're absolutely incredible and you can do that. And I think they're getting to do it in so many different ways, through music, through sport, through art. And I think being able to do it in creative ways is something that is exciting, and getting people to get to know people from different backgrounds to them. So I was on I don't know if anyone's heard of NCS, the National Citizenship Service, and I was on the first ever wave of it. And I look back and I think, oh my goodness, it's so huge now that it was incredible that I got to experience it. And we were all from London, and we were kids, well, about 16-year-olds from across the city, different backgrounds, different families, completely, and we all had to work in a team together. And there was something about learning from some of those people, some who had different experiences to me. I learned from them. I hope some of them learned bits from me. And to see them all now doing their different things, we all got to join together in a passion that we had. We created our little campaign, our own group, and we're giving the opportunity. And I think having something that we were in control of, that we decided, and we got to learn from each other, was really, really important. I think sort of started that appetite of then getting involved in loads of different other things. So I think it's getting it as something that you're passionate about.
I think it's a really tough thing to do. We unashamedly use this sort of star quality of the Olympics to go into schools in East London, and particularly to go in and talk to girls and get them interested in design and engineering, and try and take some of the younger members of the team in to actually talk to them and deconstruct their careers, to actually show how actually quite a lot of people had come from quite disadvantaged and different backgrounds into doing some quite, because often people just look at people at the top of an organisation and think, I can never get there. And in the Crown Estate, we're doing a lot of work with Reading Real Estate Foundation and Open University, Into University, working with trying to get a much broader group of people coming into property and construction, which is very one-dimensional as a profession, and particularly targeting young girls and ethnic minorities from deprived backgrounds, and just actually getting them to come in and spend a day with us and have a number of women in the business, just talking to them about how they chose their career, the different steps they've taken. And it's amazing. In a business, we put together some little case studies of some amazing women in our business and partners. And it was really interesting when you deconstructed, what I wanted to be when I was 13 and how I got to where I want to, and, my sort of passions in life. And I learned a lot going through that process of some of the women in the organisations and the bizarre routes that we end up where we are actually, and just showing these girls telling our own stories in a very authentic way and just encouraging them, really. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and you can only target a small number of people, and then quite a lot of mentoring and coaching as well, so one-to-one.
So, I know there are other hands up, but I think what I should do is invite the panel to give their final thoughts, and then we'll allow the conversation to spill over into the room so that we're not just hearing from the sages on the stage, as it were. So, Na, as you were last up, perhaps you could be first.
So I guess my takeaway from this is really encouraging diverse leadership and pushing those who would have never even considered it and don't necessarily have people that look like them in leadership roles to do even more so. So if you come across someone, a young person, anyone at all, and you think, oh, they're really interesting, they've got something about them, push them, make them try new things, because I think that's one of the ways in which people can sort of see their potential, because I know there's so many people out there with it, and I don't actually think you need to be that special to be a leader. I think it's about getting the opportunities. And I think the more opportunities that we can give to people to get that experience, to get a taste for it, the more diverse the leadership we're going to get. So that's sort of my takeaway from this evening.
I think for me it's encouraging ourselves and the people around us that life begins beyond your comfort zone. So whether it's standing up and singing a solo in a choir, or whether it's doing on my 50th birthday, doing my sort of, challenge myself to do my sort of first triathlon, or, going up to Everest Base Camp. It's sort of, it doesn't have to be in business necessarily, but trying different things and not being scared to try different things. Because I know in my early life, and I know a lot of particularly women that I work with, you draw very tight circles around yourselves and you sit yourself in this box, and sometimes you're quite scared to sort of go outside of that box into unknown territory. I think sometimes trying different things in sport or at home or in music sort of can really sort of encourage you to spread your wings a bit at work and, try different things. And sometimes, what's the worst that can happen? Just challenge yourself to do things outside your comfort zone. And the more you do it, and when you enjoy it, the more you do it. So give it a go.
I'd echo what Nara and Alice were saying in terms of one of the things I'm proudest of is that we've had people come through our business, come in very sort of junior roles, people from different parts of the world who had what seemed to be quite limiting a belief about what they could do, and have flourished. And one of our most brilliant consultants started as a project administrator. She's now studying to be a chartered psychologist. And you think, well, that's just fantastic. I think there was a sense of optimism that she came into and that she brought with her, and that sort of married beautifully, and said, well, why not? And that gave her the chance to flourish and be something she never thought she might be. So I think optimism and giving people a break is a good starting point.
So I think we seem to have reached a neat conclusion that leaders are made, not born, which is particularly in a room like this, I think is nice. Is nice to hear. Thank you to our panel this evening for your contributions and sharing your knowledge and experience and your thoughts. Thank you to you, the audience, and to you on the Facebook Live as well. Please do join us for a drink and to continue the conversation. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
Okay, just to say, we really value your feedback. So we've left feedback sheets on your chairs. We'd like to know what you thought of the discussion and also how useful you found the networking afterwards as well. So please let us know. I'm just going to ask the panelists to stay in here for just a moment. I want to introduce you to the global graduates at the back and get a couple of pictures. And also, I just want to mention the photography tonight has been provided by an alumnus who set up a company. His name's Tony, sat over here. He'll give you a wave. I just want to. He came along to one of these events previously. We got chatting, and it was just one opportunity that I found to find a source of photographers within the alumni network. So just a little bit of a plug. What you can do in the next room now is you never know what you might find. So please talk to everyone and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.